John Ewell was someone who felt that he was a victim of the justice system. He had 2 previous robbery convictions, which were now counted under the new 3 strikes law in California in 1994. He was then caught trying to deposit a $28,000 check into his account and was charged with check forgery, which would potentially count as a 3rd strike, with a possible sentence of 25 years to life in prison. John pled guilty for a reduced 7-year sentence. While John was in prison, his wife became a member of a group that worked to reform the 3 strikes law, as she believed that his nonviolent 3rd offense of check forgery shouldn't count as a 3rd strike. She even brought her gripes to the LA Times in 1999, bringing statewide attention to the issue as it played a huge part in the reduction of her husband's sentence. After John was released, he joined his wife's organization, becoming a hairdresser and a handyman, putting on a front as a reformed man, even going on the Montel Williams show to protest the 3 strikes law. But after all this, John couldn't quiet his urges, and this led to a surprising escalation in his crimes that left 4 people dead. Welcome to History's Biggest Villains. John was born in 1957 in California. Not much is really known about his childhood, but it's clear that he was a career criminal. In 1985, he forced a woman to withdraw money from an ATM at gunpoint. John pled guilty to robbery and received a 9-month sentence. In 1989, he and 2 others forced a man out of his truck, tying him up before stealing his wallet, keys, and watch. The victim, who identified John as one of the robbers, testified that he told him, "Don't move if he didn't want to get hurt." John was charged with robbery again and sentenced to 8 years in prison, but he was paroled after 6. In 1994, California adopted the 3 strikes law, basically stating that offenders with 2 previous convictions for serious or violent crimes can be sentenced to prison for 25 years to life if they're convicted of another felony, no matter how minor. Later that year, John was caught trying to deposit a stolen check worth $28,000. He was charged with check forgery, a potential 3rd strike. Under the new law, prosecutors could have sought a 25 to life prison sentence for John, but he pled guilty in exchange for a reduced 7-year sentence. While he was locked up, his wife Carmen joined Families to Amend California's 3 strikes. This group seeked to reform the law, as Carmen would eventually become the organization's treasurer. The group focused their attention on prisoners serving potential life sentences for things like minor drug possession and petty thefts. One of the biggest changes they wanted was a requirement that an offense be serious or violent to count as a 3rd strike. Carmen even went to the LA Times and said that the law was an injustice, as without it, John's nonviolent offense of check forgery wouldn't have gotten him such a long sentence. When John was released in 2002, he joined the organization with his wife. 2 years later, he attended a news conference in support of a vote that would amend the 3 strikes law, as he wore a shirt saying "Fix 3 strikes." He even spoke to the news, saying that he lived in fear that he might commit a small crime and end up in prison for life. In 2006, John was one of several guests on the Montel Williams show, as the topic of the law was discussed. He spoke mostly about his forgery conviction, saying he deposited a bad check that his cousin gave him. Court records show that he told a different story at the time, telling his probation officer that a woman outside the bank had asked him to deposit a check for her in return for a cut of the money. John found work as a hairdresser and a part-time handyman. Residents of his Harbor Gateway community of Los Angeles knew him as a friendly guy that was willing to help others. However, in February 2010, he was charged with 2nd-degree commercial burglary and petty theft. He was accused of switching an electronic price tag from a cheap pry bar with one from an expensive Dyson vacuum cleaner at a Huntington Park Home Depot, before taking the vacuum cleaner to the self-checkout line with the wrong tag. Prosecutors filed felony charges, but didn't seek a possible life sentence under the 3 strikes law. The second time they had used their discretion not to count a new charge against him as a 3rd strike. He was allowed to remain free on $20,000 bail. In July, John was accused of stealing from another Home Depot and charged with grand theft of personal property. Deputy District Attorney Eric Paradin agreed to let him remain free on bail. On September 14th, John pled no contest to the first of his theft charges in exchange for a 32-month prison sentence. The court agreed to postpone sentencing, citing an eye surgery that John needed. On the same day he entered his plea, he was charged in LA with a 3rd case of shoplifting from a Home Depot. The prosecution marked the 4th time in 16 years that the district attorney's office filed felony charges against him, but didn't pursue the case as a 3rd strike. At an October 4th court hearing, Paradin, the prosecutor, again didn't object to John remaining free on bail. But 10 days before, John had escalated his criminality to a level no one expected. On September 4th, 2010, John broke into the home of 80-year-old Hannah Marcos, who lived in Hawthorne. Using a window cord to bind his hands behind his back, John repeatedly punched him and beat him with a blunt object, as the attack caused Hannah to suffer a fatal heart attack. Later that afternoon, a family member entered his home and found his body face down. A month later, on October 13th, John walked 2 homes down from where he lived and knocked on the door of 53-year-old Denise Roberts. Denise was on the phone when she heard the knock, as the person she was on the phone with heard her say "Brother John" before the phone hung up. Once inside the house, John bound her hands behind her back before gagging and strangling her to death. He robbed the place before he left, as Denise's body was discovered by her husband later that afternoon. On October 21st, John posed as a handyman and entered the home of 69-year-old Lehman Turnage and his 57-year-old wife Robin. He tied the couple up one by one before strangling them both to death, robbing the house and taking jewelry afterwards. The couple's bodies were discovered a few days later after family members requested a welfare check. During the investigation, police discovered surveillance video of a man using an ATM with Robin's credit card. On October 23rd, John tried to use her card again outside a Shell gas station in Gardena. He didn't wear a mask, and the security camera captured images of his face. He was arrested, and by the time of his capture, the 4 murders had attracted local media attention. His vehicle was also searched, and police found a Bible and a newspaper article covering the arrest of the grim sleeper, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. John would remain in jail until his preliminary hearing, which was continually postponed for unknown reasons. More evidence also showed that he was pawning off the items that he stole from people's homes. In January 2013, John was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 4 counts of robbery. He denied committing the crimes and pled not guilty. Due to an immediate grand jury indictment, the case was due to head to trial shortly after. He faced a possible death sentence if the case were to go to trial, and he was found guilty. In May 2019, John, who up to that point denied being responsible for the murders, accepted a plea deal that allowed him to plead guilty to all 4 murders in exchange for the death penalty taken off the table. Thus, on July 18th, he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to Valley State Prison in August 2019 to serve his sentence. My thing is, if you're complaining about the law, then stop breaking it. You've gotten off. You got a reprieve on 2 robbery convictions, but yet you're stealing again. 3 strikes law is bad. You robbed 2 people. You robbed a woman and you robbed a guy and took his truck. Like, what do you think is going to happen? The fact that they kept letting him out, the prosecutors didn't file charges and put him away because he obviously has a habit. Like, how do you get caught stealing 3 times, like the same exact charge 3 times in like 6 months, and they don't put you in jail? Like, oh, let's let him go free, and now 4 people are dead. I understand you're trying to be more lenient, the punishments aren't trying to be so harsh, but when you have someone who is a habitual breaker of the law, get that man in prison. You could have saved the lives of 4 people if you had kept that man in prison. You get caught stealing from a Home Depot, and then you do it again 2 months later, and then you do it again 2 months later after you've been caught the last 2 times. That's the crazy part. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate all the support you guys give this channel. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button, turn on my post notifications if you haven't already. But thank you. Please be safe, stay on the grind. I'm out. Peace.